Dr. Kevin Donnelly. Are you there, sir?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you for joining us.
Willing to have a chat.
Thank you. Dr. John Bruni is here and Professor Plimer is with us as well, and we're at the dining room table. Congratulations on the book, Doctor.
Well, it was very timely. I started thinking about this, writing about it some years ago in terms of what was happening around the world, not just Australia. There's been a significant cultural shift in terms of the broader culture, not just politics. But it was very timely. I was very happy to have it published about 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, I will give the address. I guess it'll be Booktopia and all of the other regular places that you can buy books, but people can go to your website and do it as well?
Yeah, so my webpage is one word, kevindonnelly.com.au. And I must admit, I've seen it advertised for $30, $40, which is really exorbitant. I'm selling it with postage for $32.
Okay, bargain. Now, the article that appeared in the Australian that you very kindly sent me
It was the Daily Telegraph.
Oh, it was the Daily Telegraph. Okay. You say, a rock star welcome in Perth, $4 million raised in a single fundraising drive, and opinion polls putting the party ahead of both majors suggest that One Nation is now a force to be reckoned with. And I think Professor Plimer agrees with that 100%.
Yes, very much so. I think we've had a fundamental shift politically in Australia and also worldwide. We were talking earlier about Italy and Nigel Farage in the UK. I think there's been a very significant change. It's a very exciting time to be alive.
Most definitely. And many years ago, I read a book by Roger Scruton. You might know him.
Yes.
A very famous English cultural critic and philosopher. And he wrote a book some years ago, just after Brexit, when the United Kingdom voted to leave the European Union. And he made the point then as to why this was happening, this cultural shift. And it happened in America when Trump was first elected. Also, the rise of centre-right parties in Europe, even closer to home. The vote against the Indigenous voice to Parliament showed, it's further evidence. And there's an American academic, Breitbart, I think his name is.
Breitbart, yes, Andrew Breitbart, yes.
That's the one. He argued culture is upstream of politics. And what he meant by that is that what's happening day to day, year to year, in terms of the political scene, it doesn't happen by accident. It's actually very much influenced by the broader culture. And in the book, I make the point that when I was at university, Gough Whitlam was elected, and the marketing, the advertising was very catchy. It's time, and it was after the conservative Robert Menzies era, when people came back from the war, and really the focus was on home, community, family, working. It was a more conservative time with Robert Menzies, and then Gough Whitlam really heralded a cultural shift. Now, whether it was the Female Eunuch by Germaine Greer, the Vietnam moratoriums, the no divorce, the new act about divorce, there was a lot of cultural change. The hippie movement, make love, not war, and I think people took that literally back then.
Yeah.
And what's happening now is that there's a shift back to a more conservative culture, and that's why it's happened in America, Europe, and now Australia.
And do you think "fire the liar" is that phrase equivalent to its time?
I don't think it will be as powerful, and that's just my view. And we've got 2 years to go before the election,
yes,
obviously.
A long time.
And even reading the papers today and seeing the commentary on the ABC, which I rarely listen to, after Pauline Hanson's speech at in Canberra, there will be a lot of people, a lot of media, a lot of self-interested groups who will spend the next 2 years tearing her down and trying to diminish her stature in terms of really getting people to think that she's not up to it, that she's populist. This is the word they use. Anything they don't like, they say it's populist. So they'll 2 years is a long time to wait.
Well, we saw that in Question Time, and I thought she handled that very well. We had The Guardian and the SBS and Michelle Grattan have a go at her. And I thought she handled that very, very well. And as for populist, how the hell do you get elected to Parliament unless you get a majority of the votes? It's beyond me.
It's weird. But she showed great courage to even show up there. I know she hadn't done that she hadn't been a guest at the...
Well, she hadn't been invited.
Well, yeah, that'd be right, for 30 years. But she showed great courage knowing that the deck was well and truly stacked against her.
Oh, definitely. And the other point I made on radio the other day, people have known Pauline Hanson for over, 30 years? And when she was disendorsed as a Liberal candidate for her views about immigration. And, it's ironic that she went to jail for a period, but she's never changed in a sense. She's not a retail politician, as I call them.
You know what you're getting.
Absolutely. She's consistent. She's authentic.
Yeah.
Unlike a lot of politicians, if you look at Albanese, certainly Daniel Andrews in Victoria, they've never had a real job. They've gone from student activism, university activism, into a trade union or a movement, then work for a Labor Party. They're apparatchiks, as I call them. Whereas Pauline Hanson, she makes mistakes. She's not the most articulate person out there, but people identify with that. People are fed up. And this is the point Roger Scruton makes. People are fed up with the elites. He talks about oikophobia, people who are global in their outlook, who are multicultural, diversity indifference, who, as you said before, Ian, can afford to go to Bali or Phuket, can have 2 or 3 cars, can eat at 5-star restaurants. People are fed up with that elite. And the Teals illustrate that perfectly. People want community, family, kinship, and a sense of patriotism.
I had dinner the other night with Michael Kroger and a few others, and Michael made a very interesting point, and I have to check it, but he argued that since the formation of the Australian Labor Party in the Depression of 1891, that not one treasurer or prime minister from the Labor ranks has ever started and operated their own business. And I think that's what you're up against. You're up against people who in the Labor Party have no idea about how you convert an idea into paying tax.
The real world, in other words.
Yes, and it's those taxes that pay the bureaucrats. And then on the Liberal side, he was arguing that they have a problem with snobbery, that they look down on the average punter. They look down on Pauline Hanson because she's not articulate, because she doesn't have her 2 talking points, and she stumbles and trips over things, which everyone does. And I thought they were 2 very good points. I'm going to check him on the first one, but he's a man who's a lifelong Liberal, and he sees the danger of Pauline Hanson.
Yeah, I mean, my view on that's quite right, Ian. The other point, and I was the Chief of Staff to Kevin Andrews for a year and a half under the Howard government, and one reason I left was that most of the people working there as staffers were young, brash, apparatchiks, on the make, trying to get to aggrandise themselves. They hadn't had they've gone straight from university, often into being in a politician's office. They're so detached from the real world that, as I say to my friends at the Victoria Market, I'd like to get some of these politicians and staffers into, the delicatessen or the seafood shop, make them work for a month, get up at 4 a.m, work 12, 14 hours, balance a budget at the end of the week, and most of them would never be able to cope.
Yeah. Not to speak of even meeting a payroll and having that responsibility around your neck. Now, we can change the government, But how do we change the entrenched, well, every department, every school, the media? You look. How would you unravel all of that woke?
Absolute. That's a very good question. I mean, I'll go back a step. Over the last 11 years, I was at the university, the Catholic university, where I was given the freedom for most of the time to do research. And what Antonioni Gramsci, the Marxist in Italy during the 30s, called cultural hegemony, he argued back then that the way the bourgeoisie or capitalism dominated and controlled people was to take over the institutions. Now, later on, the German activist in the 1960s, Rudi Dutschke, argued the same point. And he made famous the expression, the long march through the institutions. So you're right, whether it's intermediate organisations, trade unions, media, even the church, family, the cultural left or cultural Marxism has been very, very successful in taking that long march. Now, one thing, and I got to know Bob Santamaria very well, God bless him, back in the day. And what Bob Santamaria said to me, Kevin, we have to be aware of how the communists and the socialists, how they work. They have short-term, medium-term, long-term strategies. And that's one thing conservatives have not been able to do over the last 20, 30 years, and especially the Liberal Party under people like Malcolm Trumbull, as they called him in Washington, Malcolm Turnbull. And the Liberals have not been good at that, and that's why I get back to Roger Scruton. He says what we should be fighting, the battle of ideas, as John Howard called it, and we should be championing what he calls cultural conservatism.
Isn't Pauline Hanson trying to do that?
I think, almost instinctively. Almost instinctively. I mean, because of her life, her background, her career, if I can call it, she's been in politics a fair while, but she understands retail, how to run a fish and chip shop. I think she has that instinctive feeling, and it's interesting, again, Roger Scruton makes the point that unlike the elites, who suffer from what he calls oikophobia, the Greek word apparently, unlike those, people like Pauline Hanson, and most people generally are, he would argue, inherently conservative. Most people, when you sort of get down to brass tacks, they want a sense of family. Most men and women still identify as men and women. Most, enjoy having their family around, kinship, community, local community. We need a sense of identity, a sense of being grounded in something rewarding and fulfilling. And that's where Pauline Hanson almost instinctively has captured that. And I'm sure there'll be people over the next couple of years advising her on how to put this into a broader picture.
We were talking about that a bit earlier, and I know a number of the people advising her. I also, I knew Malcolm Roberts before he was in politics, when he was a mining engineer, and I said to him once, look, all this problem about identifying as a male or female, you can measure it. And engineers are about measuring. I said, look, you can measure an XY or an XX chromosome. End of story. Right. Every single cell in your body is either an XX or an XY. You can measure
Absolutely.
it. And if you put that argument, it's irrefutable.
No, you're right. And I mean, I'm a Catholic. I also argue it's God-given. The Bible tells us, man and woman, he created them. But the other point here, if we're talking about that topic, parents are beginning to understand, even in kindergarten, certainly in primary and secondary school, under the Safe Schools program, which was a gender fluidity program put together in part by Ros Ward from La Trobe University. She admitted at a Marxist conference some years ago, it was not about stopping bullying. It was about a glorious cultural revolution where young children, students could self-identify, anywhere on a dynamic and, LGBTQI plus scale. People are starting to wake up that when their son or daughter comes home in grade 3 or year 3, and I had my niece tell me over a year ago, her little boy came home and he said, "Mum, am I a boy?" And so this propaganda, this indoctrination, it's incredibly widespread. Climate alarmism, and Ian knows more about this than anyone, they've been teaching that Labor and Liberal governments over the last 30, 40 years. And I'll never forget in Victoria, under a Liberal Minister for Education, every school got a free copy of the Al Gore video. So whether it's climate alarmism, gender fluidity, multiculturalism, diversity and difference, people are thankfully flocking to One Nation because that's what they believe. That's what it's like. You're in the desert and you suddenly found a well and you're going to be able to get some fresh, clean water.
And a dead kangaroo down the bottom of the well.
I hope not.
Kevin, if you don't mind me just interjecting here, I mean, we were having a very robust conversation before we had you on, and a lot of the stuff that we spoke of was very relatable in terms of what you were saying today. But how much is the likes of having someone like a Pauline Hanson enough to shake the system up? Because I tend to think a little bit like Ian Plimer. I think that there is a Canberra elite, there is a bipartisan consensus, an elite consensus, if you will, in terms of where modern Australia is going, that even if Pauline Hanson were elected as Prime Minister tomorrow, it would not be enough because those same people running policy would be still in Canberra. Power is still concentrated. Cultural power as well as political power, or policy power, if you will, is concentrated in Canberra. Now, if you broke up those great bureaucracies that we've known and loved for so long and spread them all over Australia, where the bureaucrats had to go and interact with the people, then perhaps we'll have a different form of governance altogether. But I don't see that happen. And unless and until that happens, we're really stuck with a problem that ain't going to go away just because we colour our Prime Minister differently.
No, you're correct. And as I said, I was Chief of Staff for a while in Canberra, and I knew firsthand, well, I saw it firsthand, how powerful the public servants are. And the other thing, I remember David Kemp, when he was Education Minister, introduced a very good program called Discovering Democracy some years ago. And it was excellent. I mean, but once it left the Prime Minister, once it left his office, went to the public servants, went to the curriculum body, and they're all around Australia, these curriculum bodies. It was diluted, it was dumbed down, and you would be lucky to actually see it in a school because most of the teachers, as we know, are cultural left, so they didn't want anything to do with it. But that's why, and it's interesting, we might talk about it at a later date. I've just written a report for the Menzies Research Centre about the national curriculum, the Australian curriculum. And one of the points I make is abolish ACARA, abolish the national body responsible for the curriculum and for testing. When you go back to Sir Robert Menzies, there was no education department in Canberra because, as we know, school education is the responsibility of the states and territories. So what I would do, and this is what I know best in terms of my background, I would abolish the national bodies that are in Canberra, whether it's ACEL, Aero, ACARA, get rid of them all. And we have in all the states and territories equivalent bodies. Now, what I would then do if I was Pauline Hanson and she was Prime Minister, I would get 10 or 12 people to benchmark what was happening in the states and territories, benchmark it internationally, and actually say to these people, well, look, here's the next school agreement. If you want to spend, as you do, billions of dollars on education, this is what you're going to have to do. And if you don't do it, there's no money.
She hinted at that in her address to the National Press Club when she spoke about health. The same argument applies to health. Canberra finances the state hospitals, but it has this huge health bureaucracy, the same as it's got the huge education bureaucracy.
Duplication.
So I think she's aware of this.
Yeah, and the other point, I was involved with the teacher union in Victoria many years ago when I first started, and there's no denying the fact that the Australian Education Union for years has been an advocate of what I call cultural Marxism or cultural left ideology, strong supporter of the Labor Party, federal and state. The other question here is, what do you do with a teaching force which is not able to, and either academically or in terms of their own prejudices, able to be objective and balanced? And what I have been doing the last 5 years is organise parents and teachers starting their own schools. We're very lucky in Australia compared to internationally that we've long accepted, and even though people want to change it, we've long accepted that you can have a non-government school system and a government. And the non-government is around about 38% of student enrolments, with the greatest growth in Christian low-fee paying schools. But I'm a great believer in autonomy, in subsidiarity, and I'd be saying one other way to address the issue: get rid of the bureaucracy, but focus on subsidiarity, autonomy, and because parents and teachers around Australia are fed up with our dumbed down curriculum, our politically correct curriculum. So if you can have that sense of subsidiarity, I think that's another point.
Well, we can add also universities to that. I have given thousands of lectures at various universities that have employed me and elsewhere, and I often get invited to give talks. The very best crowd that I ever spoke to in a university that doesn't teach any science was actually Campion College. And that is a private university. That group of students that I had asked the most penetrating questions I've ever had in my life. These kids had been taught to be critical thinkers. They had a knowledge of history. They had a knowledge of the classics, and it really impressed me. And so I think we've got to start forgetting about overfunding the number of universities we have, probably reducing the number, allowing private universities to flourish, and we will end up a better society.
No, I know Campion quite well. I spoke there some years ago, and many of the graduates come and speak at the conferences I organise. So they're shaped in Sydney, Campion College, much like a liberal arts college in America. And there's been a huge explosion in America and Europe of colleges and universities dedicated to a curriculum that I call academically rigorous, morally grounded, and emotionally and spiritually enriching.
I would agree.
And a lot of it goes back to a classical education, back to the ancient Greeks and Romans, but also a liberal education, as argued by Matthew Arnold all those years ago and Michael Oakeshott, an education. And this is what's so vital. We need to educate young people about the conversation. Oakeshott calls it a conversation of mankind that's been going on for hundreds and thousands of years. So to enter that conversation, you need to know something. You can't make it up. You can't find it on Dr. Google. You can't wake up one morning. You actually have to read and talk and think. And once you get that groundwork, you're able to contribute to the conversation, whether it's art, music, literature, mathematics, science. So Campion's a great place. Another one in Sydney is Alpha Crucis. They're doing good work as well. So it's a matter of freeing it up. And also the other question, which is a hard one, teacher training, as I called it. Most departments of teacher training are really, I'd abolish them as well.
Well, I think that started when we had faculties of education appear in universities, and they basically took the place of the old teachers' colleges. So at one time, someone might have been an expert in history or chemistry and then done their dip ed. Now they do a degree, get a degree in education, which is probably worth 3 parts of nothing. Apropos what you're saying about Campion and the other colleges, Those kids learn Latin, they learn Greek, they learn the classics, they learn how to argue. And the key point that I see, having been in universities for a long period of time, is that students today cannot commit a very large body of knowledge to memory. They have to rely on AI or Dr. Google. You, like me, probably test it all the time, and it's wrong. It's wrong in fact.
But it's also wrong in context, though, Ian.
It's wrong in context. Yeah. Just look yourself up. They'll say lovely things about you.
Yeah, well, not really, but yeah.
With the private universities, there are some areas they cannot get into. Medical research, certain research in science, it's just too expensive. And so I rather like the idea of someone having a liberal arts degree before they then go on to do engineering or medicine or vet or one of the vocational subjects.
I absolutely agree with
Just
that.
if I could interrupt, sorry.
Yeah.
About 30, 40 years ago, Leonie Kramer, who was fighting this fight all those years ago, introduced me to the then head of BHP in Melbourne. I think the office was back then. And I had a long chat to him about tertiary standards and qualifications. And as I was leaving, I said, well, look, if you have to employ someone that you want to train, what do you look for? Engineering degree, science degree? He looked at me and said, no, Latin, Greek, classical education, because they've been taught to think, they're articulate, they're able to structure a sentence, they're able to read 400 or 500 pages and understand what it's about. So he said, we can train them in-house. But if they don't have that intelligence and that reservoir of knowledge, then we're in trouble.
But Kevin, Ian, just one thing that I've got to say, because there's a real bee in my bonnet at this point in time, and that is, with regard to the emphasis that government puts on education, they don't put any emphasis on the classics. They don't want a liberal arts degree at any level. I mean, just look at what they've done to the University of Adelaide down here. They've closed down humanities, social sciences. What's that? It's all about STEM now. And I find that a lot of that insipid stuff that we've been talking about from a political and cultural perspective from the so-called cultural Marxists, they want to denude us of that capacity to think that only the classical education will give us and substitute it for STEM topics only, which then leads us to another problem, and that is when you look at the Silicon Valley bros who are running around doing whatever they're doing, they're very good at what they do, and they may have STEM down pat, but they are divorced from the reality of human life. They don't know how to implement their technologies in a way that most ordinary people could, because they don't have the background of complex thinking that is required in a liberal arts degree, a properly run one.
Let me just add to that.
Oh, you did right. And just on that point, about 30 years ago, I wrote an article for The Australian where I looked at where the executives in Silicon Valley sent their children. And they sent them to Steiner, Montessori, classical schools. They didn't have computers at home because they realised the danger, I think, of the new technology. The other point here, and I taught English and literature in schools for 18 years, and when I went back and did the doctorate, the other problem here that people are not aware of, whenever you say, well, they don't do classical literature anymore, they'll say, the bad people will say, well, look, we read Shakespeare, we read Jane Austen or Patrick White or David Malouf, or we do poetry, Wordsworth, Keats. What people don't understand, and this goes back to Derrida and Foucault and the French movement, deconstruction and postmodernism, what they do is deconstruct and critique all of this literature in terms of power relationships. Because one of the things, and it goes back to the Frankfurt School in Germany, when the cultural Marxists realised there would never be a physical revolution, the way to win would be to take the Long March. They argued, and they still do, the sociology of education had a profound impact around the Western world. They argue there is no such thing as objective knowledge, impartial knowledge. Yes. Knowledge is a tool used by the bourgeoisie and the capitalist class to subjugate the other.
When I did an undergraduate degree, science degree, we were forced to study some arts subjects. The very best subject I ever did in all of my university career was English literature. And we had a lecturer called Leonie Kramer. And every week we were forced to read a book and to critically evaluate it. We were taught critical thinking, not through my science subjects, but through English literature. She was very rigorous. We also had to do a language. The choice was simple, Russian or German. And I think to actually have an understanding of literature as a scientist is extremely important, because you don't get taught critical thinking at all.
Didn't Leonie Kramer go on to run the ABC?
Yes, and also Chancellor of Sydney University. She has had a brilliant career.
I wonder what she made of the ABC.
That's a good question.
Now, isn't the problem, even if Pauline wins in whatever arrangement the right-hand side of politics can make, she's got 3 years. Now, the entrenched public servants of Canberra will give her a hell of a time.
Oh, well.
And how is a hostile public service? And she's got 3 years to unravel all of this stuff that has been going on for so long. It's an impossible job.
She should sit down and binge watch Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister. And then she will understand that she has to take them on head on.
Yeah.
And as I've mentioned on this program a number of times, we probably need to decentralise the public service. And that breaks up the power structure. It would also... if you're in the Department of Trade and end up in Gladstone, which is where we earn a lot of the country's money.
Can you see their faces?
Well, I can see them resigning, which solves the second problem. Yeah. So,
the other point here, sorry to interrupt, I think it was Graham Richardson who said if you're going to go to the races and back a horse, self-interest will always win. And I can remember when I did a lot of work when Jeff Kennett, when they were in opposition. Don Hayward was the education minister, and that's where I met John Roskin, who is now head of
the Campion, yes,
by the way.
Yes.
Back in what happened, I think the election result was on the Friday. All the top public servants had to vacate their office by Sunday, and all the Kennett appointees moved in on Monday. So you need a fundamental change, a fundamental shift. But then again, that's a problem, because I was talking to some shadow education ministers, I won't say who, and they said to me, Kevin, one of the problems is if we win government, who do we trust?
Well, Campbell Newman had the problem of getting rid of 16,000 public servants, and he ended up as a one-term premier. Yeah, so there's a danger in doing that.
No, they'll be out to get her. They'll be out to get her from day one. They're probably out to get her right now. Yes. We've got to move on. But, Doctor, thank you so much for your time, and congratulations on the book, Wake Up to Woke. Now, how do we get a copy of it?
Yeah, the best place is on my webpage. One word, Kevin Donnelly.
Right.
KevinDonnelly.com.au.
Wonderful. And so on that website, it'll be there how much to pay, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I've got it here. It's a paperback, $24 plus postage. Please select a delivery destination, obviously. I will be buying a copy.
Yeah, no, certainly, me too. But when you think about the fact that they want to get hold of our kids, now it's 3 years old.
It's actually, I would make it compulsory reading for every student, George Orwell, 1984, and everybody refers to it.
Yeah.
But but it goes back to Gramsci as well. Gramsci made the point back then that socialism would be the religion.
Along with climate change, perhaps?
That would destroy Christianity. That would destroy Christianity.
Yes.
And what the cultural Marxists have done, as in 1984, is to destroy any sense of the spiritual or the transcendent, destroys a family, the heteronormative family, as they call it, and to indoctrinate and brainwash children. So it's all about groupthink and mind control. That's why, as you've said a couple of times, they don't want young people to be independently minded or able to think critically, because it's like Alice in Wonderland. If you realise how bizarre things are at the moment, then you wouldn't follow it, you wouldn't support it.
Thanks, Doctor.
My pleasure.
Thanks very much.
Cheerio.
Kevin Donnelly, one word, and you can look that up.
You take
Kevin Donnelly, and the book is called Wake
I'm
Up
gonna go.
to Woke. Everybody's leaving. See you, Professor. Are you in town next week?
I don't know. I think so.
I'll check.